Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of AMICIE, Association of Maritime International Commercial Interest and Expertise, as its secretary, I welcome all of you, the members, supporters, and dignitaries taking part in this webinar. This society was registered 3 years ago to bridge the knowledge gap across various arms of the marine industry and has been acting as a think tank to the sector. We need your support to enable us reach the goals of consultative status to the Ministry of Shipping, Logistics and the Industry of Government of India. Hope we are able to achieve our vision and mission, and admission is open to all the people. Kindly participate and enjoy the informative seminar. And I welcome our chief guest, Madam Malini Shankar. She is very familiar to all of us. She is from the Indian Administrative Services. She was our Director General of Shipping. Now she is heading our National Shipping Board and also the Vice Chancellor of the prestigious Indian Maritime University. Now I hand over the proceedings to the Captain Puri Suri and Suresh Amirapu. Please carry on, gentlemen.
Good morning, everybody. May I request Malini Shankar formally to inaugurate?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. At the outset, I would like to felicitate the Association of Maritime International Commercial Interests and Expertise, AMICIE, on taking the initiative to organize this seminar on what is a very debated topic. The global shipping industry's annual greenhouse gas emissions total more than 1 billion tons, as we know, and shipping contributes to more than 2% of global carbon dioxide emission and 15% of NOx and 13% of SOx emissions. The third IMO GHG study estimated that for the period 2007 to 2012, shipping emitted about 1,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide every year, equaling approximately 3% of annual global CO2 emissions. The latest update to the study by Delft projects shipping emissions to increase by up to 120% by 2050 if other sectors decarbonize successfully. Under a business as usual scenario, and if other sectors of the economy reduce emissions to keep the global temperature increase below 2 degrees centigrade, shipping could represent some 10% of global GHG emissions by 2050. These are all information that I have gathered from various forums interested in transport and environment. Shipping also contributes to climate change through emissions of black carbon, which are tiny black particles produced by combustion of marine fuel. The highest amounts of black carbon particles are produced by ships, obviously burning heavy fuel oil. Black carbon accounts for 21% of CO2 equivalent emissions from ships, making it the second most important driver of shipping's climate impacts after CO2. Currently, there are no regulations controlling black carbon emissions from shipping. Correct me if I'm wrong. In April 2018, the IMO agreed a draft greenhouse gas strategy for shipping, requiring the shipping sector to reduce its emissions by at least 50% by 2050 compared to 2008, while at the same time pursuing efforts towards phasing them out as soon as possible. It was agreed that carbon intensity of international shipping should decline with reductions in CO2 emissions by at least 40% by 2030 compared to 2008 and pursue efforts towards 70% by 2050. The IMO's Energy Efficiency Design Index, or EEDI, which was approved in July 2011, is the first globally binding design standard aimed at abating climate change from shipping. It applies to all new ships, or almost all new ships, and entered into force in 2013. The index requires new ships to become more energy efficient with standards that will be made increasingly more stringent over time. Ships built in the first decade of the 2000s were reported on an average to be less fuel efficient than those built in 1990s, according to the first study of the historical development of the design efficiency of new ships. The findings, however, contradict the shipping industry's narrative. The threat of climate change and environmental issues are of growing concern for the shipping industry due to stronger financial, regulatory, and societal pressures that are driving shipping towards a more sustainable operation. The 50% GHG emissions reduction target set by the IMO is very ambitious and will require the shipping industry to implement substantial changes in fuels, technologies, and operations. Being able to meet the new internationally agreed IMO's targets is probably the main challenge the shipping industry has to face in decades. The reason for the efficiency gap, quote unquote, owes itself to a number of barriers that impede a wider diffusion and adoption of emission reduction practices in the shipping industry. Such barriers concern not only the traditional resistance of the sector towards change, but also investment opportunities and risk, uncertainty on future regulatory steps, information and time constraints, technological limits, market issues, and political obstacles. The real challenge for the future is to succeed in effectively integrating environmental sustainability with economic sustainability and shipping needs. This often boils down to the environment versus development debate. I'm certain that the discussion in today's seminar online would be fruitful in introducing greater clarity to the arguments and lead to bipartisan acceptance of practical measures in the interest of shipping and of environment. With these words, I thank you for having invited me to inaugurate. I declare this seminar inaugurated and best wishes for very successful discussion, very fruitful discussion on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Suresh Amirapu, can you say a few words on AMICIE?
Yeah, good morning. Am I audible? Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Yes. Good morning. Let me also add my own voice note of welcome to Mrs. Malini Shankar for inaugurating our seminar and also for your short but very succinct speech, which I think focused our mind on what are some of the more critical issues which are facing us. GHG, which has now come right into the forefront of everybody's mind. And this is certainly one of the most topical things that we have to deliberate upon these days. I am the Vice President of AMICIE. My name is Suresh Amirapu. As is already mentioned, I will first say a few words about AMICIE itself. As already mentioned, this long acronym Association of Maritime International Commerce, Commercial Interests and Expertise. Admittedly, it's a mouthful, but more importantly, what we are is a group of industry professionals. At one level, we aim to provide non-partisan and a professional viewpoint on all key issues facing the industry for the benefit of policymakers, regulators, implementers, and of course, the practitioners themselves. At another level, we are a think tank of experts. It's worthwhile pointing out that our membership comprises of people with senior people in the industry with expertise in their respective fields, both based here in India. And we are quite proud to say also that we have a very large membership of NRIs, which is only reflective of how brilliantly Indian professionals have gone and fertilized with their firepower, managerial talent in most of the key shipping centers of the world. In terms of a long-term vision, at one point we would like to certainly get into alternate dispute resolution and provided a comprehensive platform in that landscape as well. We also deliberate on issues which are both relevant, contemporary, and topical. And as with any such deliberation of webinar, the output, of course, depends on the input. We therefore engage the best minds who have the expertise, experience, domain knowledge, vision, and commitment. Today's offering in the form of this webinar is one such example. As you have seen both from the theme as well as from the array of speakers, these are gentlemen of such accomplishment and pedigree that I'm absolutely certain we'll have a very fruitful, meaningful discussion, and everybody's time will be well spent in this. Without further ado, I add my voice of welcome. I wish the webinar every success and we ask you to participate closely and get the benefit of what we are offering today. Thank you very much. Over to Sanjeev, please.
Yeah, morning. Trust you and your family are safe. The topic of today's discussion is an explosive mix of fuel and environmental regulation. And I think Dr. Malini Shankar, our chief guest, really, I think, made that explosive mix just in her speech. I think a lot of data have been given. Probably I also not aware. Thanks, madam. So God has given natural fuel and environment to us to fulfill our needs. So let's respect and not destroy our environment. The whole world is now realizing that we should respect rules. Nature will pay if the rules are broken. If the balance of nature is disturbed, there will be serious consequences. What takes place in one part of the world probably will affect seriously in other parts of the world. And there is no better example for this in the current situation of COVID, where we all are facing through. We have seen many regulations aimed at protection of environment. Various annexes of MARPOL convention addressing to ODS, NOx, SOx, sulfur cap, CO2 emissions, and other environmental related conventions like ballast water management and anti-fouling, etc. have come into. Out of all of them, the regulations related to fuel are the most significant and have the maximum impact both on the environment and the industry. Sulfur cap has resulted in new types of fuel coming on board vessels, and I'm glad that Indian seafarers are in the forefront of this significant change, taking charge of new vessels with LNG as the bunker fuel and methanol as for the diesel dual fuel engines. These are basically low carbon fuels. We are glad that as HIMT, we are actively taking up these challenges and being one of the first private institutes in South to launch these basic and advanced courses related to training on IGF code course. There are many more developments that are taking place to bring down the greenhouse gases, which is the focus of IMO. So now let's hear from the experts what is in the store from the shipping industry in today's webinar. Thank you.
Kamal,
Yes, good day, everyone. I'm Kamal Chadda, founder member of AMICIE, and I'm so proud that I am amongst such accomplished veterans and accomplished youngsters as well, who are going to be bringing so much more fresh blood into our industry. Madam Malini and all our senior office holders of AMICIE, and all of you ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you all over here. What I'm hearing is that the changes that are occurring in the fuel and the environmental regulations, the changes are occurring at such a pace that many of us are still grappling with the vocabulary of one kind of fuel and the regulations and the related regulations, and in the meantime another fresh one is already in the pipeline and it is being spoken about. So I'll give you a small something in a lighter vein about vocabulary, how important it is, and how it has sometimes pulled the rug from under my feet. When I joined shipping, I was as a cadet, I was 17 and a half, and no exposure at all to anything related to the marine field. And I joined the ship, and I was straight away put to write what used to be the movement book. I don't know if it is still in existence, but sorry, I have to turn this off. Yes, sorry. So I was put to write the movement book. The mate on the bridge says that please write down anchor away. I spelled it AWAY because that's only the way I knew. But of course, he corrected me and scolded me as well that it's spelled AWEIGH, which was of course the right way, the right maritime way. I'd never heard this away. Now you can imagine what happened when the ship sailed out and the pilot went off, debarked from the vessel. I wrote in the movement book, pilot away, AWEIGH. Something I don't think many of us want to see happening. So that's been my experience of vocabulary. But what I would like to say here, most importantly, is I urge all of you to please engage as much as possible with the media so that our voices go up to the highest level where the regulations are being crafted because our concerns must be taken care of. So if we are not going to be sharing our views on a regular and frequent basis, I think we might not be able to get our opinion and our side of the story in and our concerns taken care of. Thank you so much, and I wish AMICIE all the best and this seminar to take us forward and bring us great learning. Thank you. I will hand over now to the president of AMICIE, the founder president of AMICIE, Captain S. Pullett.
Thanks, Kamal, and thanks to the previous speakers, as also Sanjeev Vakil for facilitating. Actually, Kamal and Vakil are our staunch supporters. We were about 50 founding members. Right now, the attendance is 105 with a good cricket score. Just a boundary now. Okay, let me just make it a little relaxed and interesting. Otherwise, we all seem to be dressed up for a very serious discussion. Mind you, the topic is serious. So I'm going to call Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Means today is actually Labor Day, except in US, where they drive on the wrong side of the road and call it right. And that's why they have Mayday in September. Well, Mayday is a distress signal. More about that, Rajesh Tandon will speak, because the crew who runs the ship are actually in distress, coming to know of so many regulations over the years, more checklists and more paperwork and fatigue. And the bad news and good news also is there. Bad news, of course, is COVID. The good news is in Bombay it is improving, and of course we are not wearing masks for a Zoom. But let's be serious next. The topic is very, very technical. I must thank the stalwarts of the industry who have actually drawn up very serious presentation. But like Chadda said, Kamal said, let me share a few thoughts of mine. The biggest problem is we are only producing 3% of that pollution. Malini Shankar mentioned that. But are we getting penalized for that? 3%? And we are given the dregs of the bunker oil fuel after all the refining. So who will use all this fossil fuels? Mankind cannot live without fossil fuels. Okay, that's the bad news. The good news is a company like Maersk has said 0% carbon emission by IMO's deadline or earlier. So it's in the pipeline. So what's the effort about? If you see the presentation today, it's all about concerns. What we are trying to do, like Amirapu or somebody said, is we are trying to put all our brains together, brainstorming. So when we brainstorm, if you get any brilliant ideas, put it on the chat. We will talk about it later. In fact, I might come and speak later if you are not under time pressure, so that your biryani won't get late on a holiday. Now, again, jokes aside, technical details are one, but how to implement is another. There is possibility of anything that can be done. If you ask me, in the long run, probably we are going to airships, zeppelins for all cargoes that can pay their freight. Drones are developing. So will shipping die? Well, autonomous ships are coming, but I think shipping will survive with the minerals like iron ore, coal, fertilizers, wheat, grain, whatever heavy stuff. And of course, containers, they're pretty cheap. There is air freight, some of you know. So there is alternatives to shipping. Let's not lose heart and hope, or for that matter, market. But the market also is in trouble. That we will hear from our friend, young, smart Punit. And he says BIMCO is looking at some process of sharing these spoils or troubles. Of course, I am glad again, 3 of our Indian friends here are attending MEPC meetings. So whatever we discuss, whatever we brainstorm and come up with, you can be assured it goes to the right ears. And let me continue, if I can move the slide, or I have to come up with another dirty picture. Well, here's the dirty picture. I'm sorry, it's not dirty in the real colloquial way. But what is dirty here is the exhaust that comes out.
Captain Bullard, we can't see the next slide so far.
Okay, that's enough that I covered in talking. Can you see this one? Okay, are you able to see this?
Only a first slide is seen, sir.
Only the first slide is seen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me try to bring that again. Yeah, here is the dirty picture. Can you see it now? Kamal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, Suri, yes, go ahead.
the elephant. Yeah, it's sorry, it's not the dirty picture, but it is the elephant among us. The dirty part of it is the gas, the exhaust, the flatulence, as they say. We bipods also have flatulence, but that's what we are talking. But the quadruped flatulence, it seems, is more than shipping air pollution. All of you must be aware of it. Anyway, all that jokes and statistics aside, I don't know whether we're getting penalized too much given the fossil fuels, cost bearing, and mind you, right from shipyards, engine designers, owners, banks, everybody is involved. So I'm glad that MEPC has such discussion forum, which Anil Kumar will talk about later. I'm sure that Indra Bose will take all the stories along with, I understand, Subodh Kumar and Kaushik from Sanmar in Chennai. They all attend MEPC meetings. So as India becomes a superpower, economic power, we should put our heads together, come up with ideas and suggest solutions. Believe me, last 25 years as a consultant, that's what I've been doing. That's been my strength. Never to keep quiet, shout at the top of my voice, people listen. And if you talk sense, they listen to you. I hope I've been talking sense. So let me please welcome Dr. Saxena to introduce the next three speakers. First, I'm requesting Das Gupta because it's very technical. I would like him to precede Bose because Bose is going to tell us how MEPC works, and then Anil will tell us what Lloyd's is doing to create that international maritime forum to bring all the industry together. Thank you. Don't be worried about time. We are in good control of time management. We can go up to 2 hours, up to 12:30. If necessary, we will slow down later. Question answers only by chat. Thank you, Kirtan.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Captain Pulit, and good morning, everybody, and greetings from Pune. That's where I'm speaking from. A wonderful morning. The high number of participants in this initiative also only indicate two things. One is the importance and the interest in this particular topic. And number two, the efforts that has been made by it was not coming from my
Jagmeet Makkar, please mute.
Yeah. Yeah, and the second is the kind of effort which Captain Pulit and his team has put in. Okay, and I think they deserve our compliments. So we have a number of speakers from different aspects and covering different issues related to this particular topic. I was particularly happy to hear what Captain Chadha had said, that it is very necessary that something meaningful comes out from any webinar or seminar, rather than we all spend a good time and say, oh, it was a wonderful webinar, and then that's the end of it. So I'm sure whatever are the outcomes of this would come out in a proper structured way, so that the voice of the industry could be heard by the people who really make rules. Okay. So the opening speaker is the soft-spoken Mr. Dasgupta, the president of the Institute of Naval Architect and a very, very old friend of mine. I remember it was good almost about 30 years back, when he was in IRS Powai, and I was in MTI Powai, the neighbor, and I had arranged some kind of a conference there, and I had requested him, and he very, quickly agreed, and then that's on. Thereafter, we have been in touch. So I think we will hear Mr. Dasgupta. Okay, so welcome, Dasgupta sir. It's my pleasure saying hello to you and inviting you to. Okay, all yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saxena, and thanks to the organizers for inviting us to make this presentation. Well, I'll just share my screen to begin with. I hope everybody is able to see this. And this is a very, very well-known chart, known to almost everybody on this panel, on this August panel. And Dr. Malini Shankar has also talked about it, describing what all things are required to be done by the shipping industry over the next, until the end of this century. So for me, I cannot see more than 20, 25 years. So essentially what I'm going to focus about is possibly the engineering options for a transition phase from 2021 until about 2045, and try to deactivate the explosive situation in a little structured manner. Well, the carbon emission, as you can see on the left side of this screen, the total emission has been quite substantial, and the contribution from the shipping industry is approximately 2%. And this 2% is almost 1/10 of the emission coming from the most green sector, that is the agro sector. Why I'm saying this, I'll come to you later. The shipping has been in existence for the past 40,000 years, maybe. Until about 5,500 BC, we have been rowing the boats. And until about 1807 AD, we had sailing boats. And the first steamboat, which came about 1800s, they had a combination of both the sail as well as the steam engine. And therefore, the transition that they had, the time that they had, is quite substantial. The transition time that has been meted out to the shipping industry today is rather short. And this short transition is just to account for the fuel or the fossil fuel we have been using over the past 200 years. Are you able to hear me? Yes, thank you. 200, 250 years. And IMO and the industry has been trying their best to come to a solution with the form of different options that we can have with hull design, the economy of scale, power and propulsion, speed reduction, fuels and alternative energy sources, weather routing and scheduling, so on and so forth. And the 5 steps which we have been given are, which have been in existence or have been given right now in 2020, are the energy efficient design of ships, then SEEMP, then of course the energy monitoring system, EEOI, and the energy efficiency monitoring of existing ships, implementation and monitoring of existing ships, starting as I know now from 2023. So the transition time is the challenge, and this is what we have to address in possibly a little more structured manner, which I'll try to address here. There are 10 available measures which are evolutionary in nature, which have been given in the EEDI. They are the speed reduction, waste heat recovery, hull coating, hull cleaning, propeller and rudder update, weather routing, compensation of trim and ballast, propeller polishing, main engine tuning, autopilot upgrades, so on and so forth. Accounting for a reasonably good amount of reduction in the fuel consumption and thereby the reduction in the greenhouse gas. Now, this is something which is evolutionary in nature. And in order that we can account for it in a little more innovative manner, there have been 7 more additional facilities which we can incorporate: air bubbles, fuel-saving propeller attachments, remodeling the ship's bulbous bow, auxiliary sail propulsions using fixed wings sail, onboard DG grid system to reduce the specific fuel consumption, low loss hybrid system, and then fuel oil emulsion. These can generally be applied to many ships and possibly can be applied to almost all the ships, but they will mean some amount of cost. But going ahead, that this may not be quite adequate. And therefore, we need to formulate at the second level a technology strategy based on the energy requirement during the voyage, on the basis of the amount of the energy requirement, the power, and the time of the voyage, and this fuel space availability, because we cannot really do away with fuel altogether. With regard to the energy requirement, we can classify in 2 segments: high energy requirement and lower energy requirement, and fuel space availability, adequate and constrained. In terms of the fuel space, let me just clarify one thing. It is not only the fuel amount, because many of the fuels which we need to look into require a different kind of space with different kind of fuel containment system, and thereby will have different amount of space required onto the ship. So ships which are high speed and undertake a very long voyages, like container liners, passenger liners, LPG tankers, LNG tankers, ro-ro cargo ships, which require a high energy density and large volume. It is very difficult to reduce the high energy fuel, energy density fuel, which is being used now. And therefore, the right solution for them is for such ships, in my submission, is to mitigate the emission. In case of the high energy ships which have adequate spaces comparatively, like the heavy lift and transport ships, oil tankers, ore carriers, crane ships, which require low energy density and large volume available, we can supplement the mitigation process with low emission fuel and renewables. In case of the lower energy, that is, the passenger ferries, container feeder vessels, which undertake shorter distance of travel and can be refueled, we can have different solution, which possibly can be usage of low emission fuel, wind and hydrogen fuel cell, and so on and so forth. And for the inland ships, cargo vessels, launches, barges, car ferries, lower energy density and smaller volume availability, we can possibly go in for renewable energy, solar energy, battery, wind, etc. Now, the issue is whether they need to be applied to new ships or for older ships, existing ships. For new ships, they can be applied, but there can be a series of ships which are kind of stranded assets because of the regulatory compliances. And in such cases, considering the conversion of those ships need to be accounted for. When we talk about the different types of fuels, which are essentially fossil originated fuel. When I talk about the energy rich fuel, here is a list of the fuels, that is methanol, ammonia, biodiesel, LPG, rich LNG, gasoline, marine diesel oil, heavy fuel oil, lean LNG, liquid hydrogen, GTL, dimethyl ether, and generic diesel. And the GHG emissions in grams of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilojoule of conversion is given here. This chart shows that a substantial amount of the emission of the GHG emission takes place in two stages. One is from well to tank, and the second is from tank to propeller. And for us, which can be addressable for ships, is only from tank to propeller. And therefore, we need to address those. The left side column talks about the amount of energy that is available per liter. I have not used per kg because our space is in liters in volume. So therefore, I've used this megajoules of energy value per liter, which is available for burning the fuel and generation of the energy. So there we can see the green ones are the rich ones. The orange ones are possibly the ones which can be considered. But the black ones, they are really not that efficient in terms of the energy density. So they will require a substantial amount of volume. And on the right side, you can see the availability in general. It's a kind of an impression. What is available globally and easily at a reasonable cost is given here. And that is the amount which we can possibly look at while deciding on the kind of fuel that we may need to have. Now, what are the technologies which we have in terms of the fuels that we use? We have the fuels which can be used in IC engines. I have not talked about turbines because turbines, the fuel consumption is normally more, and the emission also possibility of emission of unburnt fuel also can be a little higher. We have methanol, which is liquid at room temperature and biodegradable, LNG at -163 degrees centigrade, then hydrogen and liquid hydrogen, then ammonia and green ammonia. And these are the IC engines. And here we are talking about the fuels being used as the fuel for these engines, for burning inside the engines. And the emissions reductions which can happen because of usage of these fuels are given on the table. You can look at them subsequently. In terms of LNG, it's considered to be a bipolar issue because it's available in abundance, used, but there is a prospect of methane slip, which can result in emission of methane, which is approximately 26 times of GHG value compared to carbon dioxide. But that can be utilized subsequently. I'll come to that later. Then apart from this technology of engines, we have the fuel cells, which use the AFC. AFC stands for alkaline fuel cell. Hydrogen can use almost quite a few number of different types of fuels like hydrogen, LNG, methanol, ammonia, etc. So we have AFC, that is the alkaline fuel cell, then the polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cell, that is PMFC. Then we have the phosphoric acid fuel cell, molten carbon fuel cell, direct methanol fuel cell, and solid state fuel cell, SOFC. Now, out of these, as it has been found that the methanol fuel with the low temperature PEFMC has been found to be quite promising in terms of the energy that it can produce. Apart from that, we also have electricity and hybrid, and also high tension lines, which can supply in case of inland waterways, like usage in water trams, which have already been implemented. And then we have the other energy usage technology, like in the other area like the wind, soft sail, fixed sail, Fleckner rotor sail and kite sail, and solar energy photovoltaic sail. And that this solar energy can be used and has been used in India as well. I think one of the naval architects here in Sandit, he has already put it up in Kerala for a passenger vessel, which is operating very successfully. Now here we need to say that we have not considered the recycling of the issues which needs to be looked into, perhaps at a later date. The maximum reduction of CO2 or SOx and particulate matter is possible only if it is produced from renewable energy. LNG and methanol are competitive in terms of energy costs. Hydrogen and ammonia are also a little more expensive. And the large cost range indicates a significant uncertainty in terms of the pricing that exists today. Coming to the mitigation aspect, I want to talk about the possibility of the carbon capture. This is a proven technology on land-based plants and have been used quite exhaustively all across and are being implemented in many power plants. The carbon can be used from the exhaust and can be cooled in or can be can be mixed with some solvent and stored into the ship before being taken out. Only problem here is post-oxidation, the weight of the fuel can be a little more than the weight of the original fuel. That needs to be accounted for. But possibly by that time, the total amount of weight of the ballast is also reduced. And it is very similar to the scrubber technology and can be managed in the exhaust funnel area. The storage of carbon dioxide on board can be used in dried and decontaminated by chemical process, liquefied at -20 degrees centigrade at 20 bar in tanks or ISO tanks and then transferred. And this, we can use some other range also at -50 as 50 bar and at a different temperature level based on the phase diagram. And it can be transferred to a reforming plant wherein by dedicated CO2 ships as feedstock for synthetic e-fuel. And this reform can be done with steam and catalyst to produce fuel, which can be used as GTL or DME or liquid methane, and then can be recycled back. So it forms a kind of a closed loop. And this is one area where some research is being carried out by TNO and in some other countries as well, and in Japan. And therefore, it is one possible solution which can be looked into, because here we are really not compromising onto the speed, onto the total delivery distance, but at the same time, we are able to capture the carbon. When this is combined with LNG, it is a little less complicated because the exhaust gases from the LNG contains lesser contamination, number one. So it can be cooled rather easily, and the CO2 can be cooled by the LNG itself, because LNG is at -163 degrees centigrade, which can be used to cool the CO2 in the process and then can be stored thereafter.
Gupta sir, sorry to interrupt. We are a little short on time. Thank you.
Last slide, yes, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you. So coming to the concluding remarks, I try to address the emission-related challenges within the transition framework in a stepwise and structured manner. I have not addressed the biofuels for the mainstream shipping because of the local availability in a limited manner. I feel there is a possibility of greedy, large-scale agro production, which can be counterproductive in the whole scenario of the global emission. It is understood that the financial help is available for upgradation and conversion of ships up to 10 years of age. And we need funding. And this funding can be obtained from IMRF through the IMRB. And I would urge the powers that be, who are like Dr. Shankar, who are attending here, to help us get the fund so that appropriate research can be taken over. For all of us, it's going to increase cost, and accept the fact that the shipping cost of shoes at less than 10 cents, those days are possibly over. Thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dasgupta. Excellent presentation to set the ball rolling for this very interesting yet complicated topic. Yes, I mean, in the end, he had touched on the issue of research. You know, I mean, Indians have definitely very sharp brains, and it is imperative that, you know, we do some kind of a research and you know, present to the international community rather than just keep on doing what the international community tell us to do. You know, okay, and I'm sure this could be one of the very important thing. Yes, very informative slides. Okay, excellent presentation. So compliments.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
We go to the second speaker, is Mr. Bose, a very old friend of mine, and probably the only person who knows so much about MEPC, which I doubt if anyone else will know. Okay, he has even authored a book on environmental issues from the Great Eastern Shipping. So we welcome Mr. Ryan Bose, and all yours, sir. Take it forward, please.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena, for the kind introduction. Can my screen be seen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Seems very well.
Okay. Right. Greetings to all. First of all, I would like to thank AMICIE for inviting me to speak in this webinar on the very topical subject. I will just give you, I mean, since Captain Pullat said that I will give you a process of how IMO MEPC works. IMO and MEPC, I mean, it consists of all the member states and then representation from all industry sectors, from floating staff, insurance, ship owners, everybody, and then lots of NGOs. So all kinds of input comes when you are discussing a particular regulation. And in Indian scenario here in DG Shipping, we have a very active MEPC preparatory team. We work around the year with representation from ship owners, Institute of Marine Engineers, classification societies, and various industry experts. If it's a shipbreaking issue, shipbreakers, shipyards, Ministry of Environment whenever required. So all kinds of inputs goes in, and we do submit a lot of papers. Even in this GHG reduction, we have been very active. And so there is, and if we have forums like this, we get more inputs, and that's helpful. I will just give you an example. I mean, since Captain Pullat said that you can be a little flexible with oil, with time, so I'm just taking that liberty. 2020 sulfur cap, this was extremely scared legislation that it's going to affect. But what happens in MEPC was when all these concerns were raised, a table was made that let us list out what are the concerns. There were 33 concerns. And let's see what we can do to address each one of them. And that was taken as a project by MEPC in the subsidiary working group. And we worked through it, and today it's very happy to see that we have transitioned into 2020 without much of a problems that we anticipated. Though technical challenges remain on board ship, but it's rather smooth compared to what we had expected. There was cooperation and input from refinery sector, bunker suppliers, support from the ship operators. GAG is extremely different ballgame, totally, because here you have the energy producers, the processors, the transport chain, storage, and the ship operators. 85% of investment will go in land-based infrastructure, only 15% on ship. So there are a lot more stakeholders here. Now, coming to my presentation, I thank Mr. Dasgupta for covering this particular part. So I just skip it. Now, to implement that particular strategy, MEPC has three short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. So in short-term goals, which applies from 2018 to 2023, the time for development, and we are going through that exercise right now, it consists of developing technical and operational means for reducing the energy intensity of ships to 40% reduction from 2008 base level. So in the next slide, I will just give you a little brief about it. Introducing EEDI phase 4 for new ships, and develop GHG life cycle emission guideline for all types of fuel. Currently, we just do it from ship's tank to propeller, what is the GHG emission? But now from well to propeller, that will be taken into account. Then improved ship-port interface, just-in-time arrival. Tanker sector is already doing it. That is no point rushing to the port only to be told and fully knowing that you have to anchor and stay there for 2 weeks. There's no point rushing and burning more fuel. So just in time is a concept that you can slow down your speed in consultation with the charterers and the port authorities and just arrive in time when the berth is available. That way you save fuel, and there is a huge opportunity for reducing fuel consumption here. So in short-term measure, this is going to be addressed. And which Mr. Dasgupta mentioned, International Maritime Research Board for coordinating the whole lot of research activities that is going on around the world, mostly in Europe and Asia. The midterm goal, 2023 to 2030, is program for uptake of low and zero carbon fuels and possible introduction of market-based measures. I mean, today the alternative fuel is much more expensive compared to fossil fuel. So put a levy on the fossil fuels to make the alternative fuel competitive. But there is a lot of political connotations here because the different countries and different level of development. So it will be debated for some time before it comes in at IMO. Long-term measures, development and provision of zero carbon and fossil-free fuels. Now, another very important element in the GHG discussion is impact on states. Because GHG reduction has got an impact on economy of countries. You just can't reduce it because we, especially countries like us, for development, our emission will go up. So we have to take that into account. So for every measure that you propose, you are supposed to do an impact on states. And then parties give that impact assessment that is considered by MEPC, and any negative impact that must be addressed or that regulation will not go through. So these are the various termed measures going on. Now I will just add on to what Dr. Malini Shankar informed about the third GHG study. Therefore, subsequently, the fourth GHG study has been published in August last year, which gave the figure from 2012 to 2018. And here it shows good news that from 1990 onwards, the trade and CO2 emission has been growing together very closely, tight. I mean, this is from UNCTAD seaborne trade, so it has been growing. But from 2008, the trade is going, but the emission is dropping. And these yellow lines are emission intensity. So there is a decoupling of the trade and the CO2 emission. So this is largely happened because of ships slowing down wherever possible and introduction of energy efficiency in ships, AEDI, and lots of energy efficient technologies on existing ships. So what is going to be the impact of those particular midterm, long-term measures that we talked about? How do you achieve it? Less maritime trade? It's yes, this fourth GHG study says that the CO2 emission may be up to 110% more than 2008 level. So it is very, very moderate. We don't see but previously it said 300% more. That's not the case now. So, but maritime trade, whether it will reduce or not, we have to see how it goes. It is unlikely. I mean, instead of carrying fossil fuel, it will be carrying hydrogen, CO2, liquefied security, CO2, etc. Slower ships, definitely, ships will be slowing down, and need for low and zero carbon fuels, regarding which Mr. Dasgupta gave a very good elaboration. Now, today, methanol is, and that was in the top of the table of Mr. Dasgupta, which is considered as an alternative fuel. And methanol fuel ships exist. Methanol carriers, some of the carriers, at least 6-7 of them, are running on methanol, and methanol engines are available from the MA and BMW. But the methanol that is produced today from fossil fuel results in more GHG emission, because in producing it, you emit CO2. So it's environmentally, it's not good. But if you can make that fuel by carbon capture technology, which Mr. Dasgupta explained, that in the processing, whatever carbon comes out, you capture it and then put it underground, etc. In that case, there is a reduction up to, that's called blue methanol, 50% reduction in GHG emission. Then if you, so methanol, it is CH3OH. So you need carbon atoms, hydrogen atom, and oxides, hydroxide atom, and combine them together. So if you make hydrogen by electrolysis from water, and from air capture, you get the CO2 and combine them together, they call methanol synthesizing, and get, using renewable electricity, that means your solar cell, wind power, etc. In that case, there is up to 85% reduction in GHG emission. Same methanol. So we have the engine, but the fuel development technology has to improve. And there is a lot of capacity to reduce the cost of production. So that's where the research and development has to go in. Now, this is a goal. This is what is going to kick in 2023. On the x-axis is the timeline, and on the y-axis is the carbon emission intensity, means grams of CO2 emitted per ton mile of cargo carried. So see the dotted line that you see, that is the emission reduction trajectory by 40%. This is in 2030 from 2008. So this line has been drawn through studies. And in 2023, where it is there. And it is there for every ship type and ship size. I mean, Suezmax tankers or VLCCs or Kamsarmax, these size sectors are addressed. So for each ship will be given a carbon intensity, which they have to reduce year by year until 2030. It is expected once ships implement EEXI, I'm sure you'll hear about subsequent lecture. It's a technical measure. You do it one time to the ship. You can reduce your CII substantially, but some more may need to be done to achieve this one. Now, there is a review clause. In 2026, January, there will be a review whether the whole world fleet is in this trajectory. If it is not, then stricter measures will be brought into force. Now, in that, apart from the regulatory part, there is in the industry, there is a lot of pressure on the shipping industry. Major charterers, they are interested in reduction of their Scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 emission means the emission you incur through logistics, transporting your goods. So, so now ship owners have to reduce their CO2 emission, and they are putting requirements which are sometimes in line with IMO requirement that is being developed, this 40% reduction, but sometimes even different, slightly different. So there is pressure in the commercial world to reduce CO2 emission. And investors in ships, they are interested in future-proofing their investment in the ships. So we have to give data about how energy efficiently ships are operating, certain energy efficiency metrics year by year, and they want to make sure that we are in track for the 2030 goal and beyond. So I will limit myself to here. So thank you very much. If there is a question, I'll take it at a later point of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bose. Always a pleasure hearing to you. And it may seem that the subject may seem to be very technical and maybe only for IMO or MEPC or the flag state and port state, etc., or the class. But actually, as very rightly indicated by Mr. Bose, that there are many stakeholders who are definitely getting affected and will continue to get affected with all these regulations. Okay. So thank you, Bosab, once again. And
Thank you.
We have the third speaker to sort of bring in all these stakeholders together and to show as to what the Lloyds is doing about it. We have a youngster, Mr. Anil Kumar, a very promising man, and I'm sure all of us greetings and best wishes to him for a very promising career. So Mr. Anil Kumar from Lloyds will be the next speaker, and Anil, all yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Saxena. Can I share my screen? Yeah.
Please.
Can you see my screen? Yeah. Yes, yeah, thank you. On behalf of Lloyd's Register, I would like to thank the organizers, AMICIE, for this opportunity to talk to you. And a very good morning, Madam Malini Shankar, dignitaries, colleagues, and friends from maritime industry. Two speakers ahead of me, they're covered well enough. So I will try and join the dots possibly in this session. Since the IMO has announced 2050 targets, greenhouse gas emission targets, the decarbonization debate has come dominated rather the maritime industry. And the clock is already ticking. We need to convert that word into actions. So those urgent actions, what we need to do, that's what I'm going to focus on. At Lloyd's Register, we have been talking to the maritime industry and its various stakeholders, and there is a clear message we get from them. They said to us that there are a lot of data out there for the decarbonization of the maritime industry, but they don't know the information from those data. That's where we decided to step in. And being an independent, trusted provider of the correct information to the industry and its stakeholders, so that they can take the right decision towards decarbonization of the industry. By the way, the zero carbon fuel is a fundamental industrial transformation in our maritime industry. Days back, we moved away from steam to fuel, for example, sail to steam. This is also a kind of a transformation in our industry. So we decided we need to look at this at this moment, though IMO target is by 2050. So Lloyd's Register has launched what we call the Maritime Decarbonization Hub. It's a joint collaboration between Lloyd's Register charity, Lloyd's Register Foundation, and the Lloyd's Register entity. How do this foundation works? One of the main purpose of this foundation is social purpose. Since it comes from our charitable foundation, this is not a technical hub, and this is all about disseminating the evidence and information to the wider maritime fraternity and the public at large. It's going to be evidence-based, all the work what we are doing, what we're going to do, and we will be publishing our assumptions so that the people or organizations can take this work and use it for acceleration of the decarbonization of the industry. So we are not solution agnostic, which means we don't have a preferred fuel candidate for our research work, and partnership and collaboration with the industry is the key, because we don't have a precedence of a zero carbon fuel or the technology associated with. So we are collaborating with the flag administrations, the fuel supply chain, the technology providers, equipment manufacturers, shipbuilders, shipyards, charterers, insurers, and financiers as well. So we need to have tangible outcome from from this hub. And we want to build this hub as a hub of experiences, and the report what we produce in the hub will be circulated to the industry time to time. So looking at the decarbonization effort and some of the progress and partnership we have done so far, and we have published quite a few thought leadership papers in decarbonization, low carbon pathways 2050, zero emission vessel by 2030. We feel that if we need to achieve 2050 target, we should have zero emission vessel on water by 2030. Zero emission vessel transition pathways, the fuel for the net zero emission vessel. These are all technical papers published out there in the public domain. Recent one is very interesting, the techno-economic assessment of zero carbon fuel, what all things we need to consider apart from the technology itself to turn this IMO's ambition into reality. And over the years, we have been also working on various projects on decarbonization. The world first hybrid seagoing RoPax vessel, Calodian, the first methanol fuel ferry, Stena Germanica, the first wind-assisted passenger ship, Viking Grace, Flightner rotor installed on the product tanker, Maersk Pelican, air lubrication, fuel-saving measures on Carmel Diamond Princess, first hydrogen fueled vessel, CMB Hydrovile. It's a small vessel operating in the harbor. And recently, the 1 megawatt hydrogen engine by hydro dual fuel projects that has been gone successfully. And we have ammonia fueled pilot projects, new build projects happening at Samsung Heavy Industries. It's an Aframax tanker for MISC in Malaysia. And we are also having a approval in principle project going on an ammonia fuel container ships, 23,000 container ship at DSME as we speak. So those were the industry projects. So now to get to zero carbon model. What we said, what we also understood is that we need to look at beyond technology readiness. We should also look at the investment readiness as well as the community readiness, because the maritime readiness is going to be an interplay of all these three readiness. For example, just to illustrate technology readiness, LNG as a fuel was well understood, and investment has gone into LNG bunkering. However, for community readiness, now we have IMO's fourth greenhouse gas emission study, which says that methane slip is going to be detrimental. So LNG as a fuel going to be considered for a short term, may not be a long term. So we need to look at all these aspects when we get into zero carbon fuel. Looking at transition in terms of wider energy context. On the left-hand side, we can see the fuel oil and diesel oil we use in the maritime industry currently. And as I said, we have adopted LNG as a fuel. But then over the last 20 years, we have a LNG available as a fuel, but the uptake in the maritime industry has been just about 1% for the deep sea shipping. So we have a challenge when we talk about zero carbon fuel in future. We have a challenge on uptake of that fuel. And if you look at from the upstream industry, as Ian Bose and Das Gupta said, the coal, oil, natural gas, which are available now, and we will have electricity produced from the renewable source of energy going forward. So when we have those cheaper renewable electricity available, and that's a pathways for producing zero carbon fuel. We can produce zero carbon fuel from various energy sources, as the previous speakers have explained. We can have it from the natural gas with carbon capture mechanism. We can make hydrogen as well as ammonia. And from renewable electricity, we can make e-methanol electrofuels, e-methanols, e-hydrogen, e-ammonia, e-diesel, e-LNG, etc. And we have battery as well as nuclear as an option as well. So for zero carbon fuel, so let us look at all this fuel what we just mentioned. Let's look at the total cost of operations. That means the investment for the fuel, building that type of a ship using the fuel, and also let's look at the voyage cost, mainly the fuel cost as well as the impact of the cargo when we use this zero carbon fuel. So this is some work we have done using future fuel. And as we can see, at this moment, the zero carbon fuels are expensive, and however, the price will drop over a time, particularly for the electro fuel when we have the renewable electricity available for producing that fuel. We measured various price scenarios, and we looked at bulk carrier as an example in this slide, but we have done that work for various other ship types as well. And we can see that generally renewable fuel, electro fuel, the price will drop, and biofuel, which are available today, and the price is going to increase over the period of time because of abundant use of biofuel, particularly in the maritime industry. But as we go through 2030, 2040, there's going to be a crossover. Electro fuel such as e-ammonia, e-hydrogen will become cheaper than the biofuel. So selecting the right fuel has to do a lot to do with your company's resilience, as well as the planning what type of fuel you want. And looking at the fuel cost, again, we looked at bulk carriers as an example in this case. And you can see in the slide that the cost is lower for ammonia. That's why there are a lot of talks about ammonia as the future fuel. I could see on the chat someone has put the write-ups on ammonia could be one of the future fuel, as it is. Ammonia is considered as one of the future fuel. And it's slightly higher than, if you use ammonia as a fuel, it is slightly higher than hydrogen, and because it is derived from the e-hydrogen, as Ian both said, currently the ammonias are produced, which are black ammonia. As we go through, we can produce the ammonia through, we can capture the CO2 from the ammonia production. We can have blue ammonia, and as when we have the renewable electricity available, we can produce ammonia through electrolysis, splitting hydrogen from the water, capturing nitrogen from the air and combining that. So that's going to be green ammonia. So we will have a transition of the fuel, ammonia itself, from black to blue to green. That's going to be the pathways for most of the fuel as we go through when the industry get more and more matured. And the impact of cargo carrying capacity, as comparing to the VLSFO fuel, the energy densities of hydrogen, as you can see, is one fourth of VLSFO. It means that we need significant storage space for hydrogen as a fuel. And this means there is going to be some impact on the cargo carrying capacity. And ammonia as a fuel occupy a bit less space than hydrogen, and biofuel even a bit lesser space. So in terms of designing the vessel for tomorrow, so we need to consider a combination of this, the future fuel, its cargo capacity, bunker capacity requirement, frequent bunkering availability of those particular fuel. So these are all the critical pathways we need to consider once we design this future fuel. Now, now to look at the how this industry is going to, our maritime industry is going to steer through the transitions. In short term, as Ian both explained, we have EEXIs, which are applied for the existing ship, which is to making the existing ship more energy efficient. But for future fuel, and which are not really available now, we need to start doing pilot projects and prototype projects in short-term basis. And moving to 2030, which is a critical window, we need to have these pilots and prototypes projects out on water. National action plans has to be drawn out, the policies to support decarbonization, carbon taxes that need to be introduced to support this future fuel. Moving into 2030 to 2050, we need to scale up those productions. We need these pilot projects to be doable and scalable. We need to have future fuel, hydrogen or ammonia, for example, the infrastructure available. And in 2030, as we said, we will have cheap electricity to renewable. And by 2050, biofuel share we can see is going to increase. But then we can also see a shift towards electro fuels produced from renewable electricity again. So what are we doing at Classification Society? we have those energy efficiency measures applicable for future fuel, and we have on the left-hand side all the possible zero carbon fuel which are available. And so we have been engaging with the industry, and we have been using this risk-based design methodology because we don't have any written rules or guidelines for using the future fuel and its technology associated with it. And we are developing, we are investigating the risk associated with the fuel and the systems, and working closely with the equipment manufacturers, shipyards, and ship designers, so that we can have a joint development programs. And the experience gained from these projects, we are transferring that into our guidance notes and rules and regulations, as you can see on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side bottom are the ship owners and shipyards. We are working with various type of future fuel projects. So if time permits, I will look into ammonia as a fuel, because some interest generated in these discussions. The reason why we are looking at ammonia with the key interest is current availability of ammonia, and which come from the hydrocarbon industry, which are used in the fertilizer industry. And as I said, the current ammonia is black ammonia. It emits greenhouse gas emissions. And there is abundance of ammonia as well in the agriculture industry. And India is the third largest producer of ammonia and third largest consumer importer of ammonia as well. So the agriculture industry will also come under the Paris Agreement 2015. That means they also need to decarbonize. They will also produce ammonia from renewable electricity as we go forward. So we will have those ammonia available for the shipping industry. That's why a lot of interest in ammonia. And looking at ammonia, the investment, technology, and community, I said we need to look at all those three aspects before we qualify viability of that fuel. So in terms of investment, the fuel price is going to be the issue. So it's not going to be really the OPEX, the new build cost for the ammonia fuel ship is going to be the CAPEX. And ammonia is attractive in a longer term, and but we still need the carbon prices and the carbon taxes and national policies to support using this fuel. From technology perspective, there are challenges. There are safety challenges, particularly around the toxicity of ammonia, but we can overcome that technology aspect. And leakage of ammonia, carriage of ammonia in a cryogenic container systems, but we are carrying LNG in much sub-zero temperatures. The bulk of the challenges for ammonia as a fuel is for the land infrastructure and the fuel production itself. The fuel production, we have discussed it. Land infrastructure is that how do we transport the ammonia, where do we store it, and how we transport it to the bunker stations, and how do we bunker ammonia into the ship. So those are the challenges. Just to summarize this, so on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see all those thought leadership documents and papers what we produced with wider collaboration with industry, academia. And on the right-hand side at bottom, you can see the partnerships class societies have been doing with the ship owners, shipyards, and various research organizations around the world. And on the right-hand side top, we have a lot of industry collaboration which is shaping up as we speak now. And we have Getting to Zero Carbon Coalition, and we have United Nations Global Impact. We got the Ammonia Institute, which Lloyd's Register sit in the board itself. And we also have certain financial principles and guidelines. The Poseidon Principle is basically a climate-aligned financial funding scheme for the ships. So the ship owner or the shipyard need to convince the finances going forward that how do they align the strategy with IMO's greenhouse gas emissions. We got the Poseidon Principle. We also have the Sea Cargo Charter, and which is basically an association of the charterers and just to promote zero carbon fuel in the industry. So that's my presentations, and the Maritime Decarbonization Hub at Lloyd's Register. It's a global hub. We are working with various interested parties around the world, and it's going to be a center of excellence to accelerate sustainable decarbonization in the maritime industry, so that we have safe, technologically feasible and commercially viable zero carbon ships by 2030. That's my presentation. Thank you very much. Open to any questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Anil.
Yeah.
Thank you, the last
Thank you,
three
Anil.
speakers. In fact, those were the meat of the presentation. Now, good news is we are extending by 2 hours to 2 hours. That means till 12:30. Have patience. It's a holiday. The meat of the presentation is over. Now we get into slog overs. The next three speakers, I have mentioned to them to speed up. Actually, this is the funda behind all what we are talking. Unless you know that, already IMO is trying, already the industry is trying, we have the knowledge, but how to get it done is the big challenge. So let me request the next few speakers to speed up a bit. We have now Dr. Sairam Krishnamurthy, a young doctor doing a lot of research for MOL Synergy. He's very keen, well read and accomplished person. So that's why he's doing research for a ship manager with 350 ships. Krishnamurthy, please.
Yeah, I would like to share the screen with your good selves. Can I go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, many thanks. Many thanks. Good morning, one and all. Many thanks for the opportunity provided to self. I would like to offer my sincere pranams to my guru sitting over here, Captain K. Vivekanand Saab, K. Chidambaram Saab, and B.K. Saxena Saab. I still remember standing in front of them as a cadet. Now, to begin with, Synergy accepts the broad consensus on the need for decarbonization. But the proposed solution, as Anil Kumar Saab, who spoke in front of me, it should be commercially viable and technically feasible. Liquid fossil fuels were comparatively easy to store, handle, and transport. They have had decades to optimize the design, maintenance, and operation of shipping systems to suit liquid fuel pattern. But please remember, the world of shipping is fast changing. It is therefore expected that when looking for a sustainable energy source to replace liquid fuel, which we are now urged to, it is a bit difficult to see an obvious silver bullet. The greatest challenge what we foresee are environmental compatibility, availability of sufficient fuel, and fuel costs in fluctuating markets. One concern that which hits out is motor tanker vessels carrying world's fossil liquid fuels contributes to a huge chunk of about 40% of global seagoing trade. And that may face huge uncertainty, or that may fall considerably. Please remember, uncertainty is an unmeasurable risk. There is also a wee bit of uncertainty in how proposed technologies are going to shape up. GI has now slowly started moving towards GA. What is that? Gas injection has now started going towards gas admission. And this will evolve over the next 10 years or so in terms of both performance, cost, in the prices, and in availability of different fuels. Also, various analyses are conducted by various research organizations, class, etc. They are all available by paper. That raises another question to us. What are all the assumptions made during their feasibility study? Words of K. Brunnen, every theory or every feasibility study starts with B bit of assumption. But are all the assumptions made not necessarily be absolute? As of now, what is best for the planet need not be so for the global shipping industry. current regulations, they are more focused on changing the engine technologies, especially with combustion, to reduce industry's carbon footprint. But the question here is, are we ready? Much emphasis has to be now laid on research and development. Please remember, R&D requires time and money for all the validations, for all the pilots, and for full-scale prototypes. Hasty validation may lead to half-baked results, very synonymous with that of your ballast water treatment system. Still, we do have a lot of niggles. And also the availability of fuel and the clarity on the type of fuel and good to go, whether it is going to be LNG versus green ammonia, whatever has been said. Reliability and scalability of technologies is more important, and technology needs to be proven and validated. A report that which is published by UMass, University Maritime Advisory Services, and ETC, Energy Transitions Commission, estimated a cumulative investment total of about 2030 to 2050 to have the emissions. It'd be close to around $1.4 trillion. Where is the money? Now, from what we hear through a WhatsApp of 24/7 splash or so, World Bank is pulling out of LNG investment. That leaves a big question mark, whether it is right or whether it is wrong. What should we do now? Another barrier, which is a big concern, is upstream emissions when new fuel is being burnt. Nothing has been concretized yet. Which direction are we heading to? While upstream emissions may not be directly under the ownership of shipping industry, it is crucially important to consider their impact at this stage to prevent investment in technologies that may ultimately not be any more greener than those of conventional ship. Please remember, remedy starts becoming worse than a disease if we don't tame upstream emissions. In case of LNG, the common sense is that not all the fuel that which is sent inside will be combusted. There will be a wee bit of unburnt hydrocarbons. And 1 unit of LNG, when it goes out, is close to around 30 times that of CO2. Having a green ammonia, burning it, may increase the NOx substantially. Please remember, 1 unit of NOx going out is 292 times that of CO2. These are the questions which I'm posing in front of your good selves as a concern, as a ship manager. So with this short note, I conclude my session. Thank you. I'm through, sir.
Suri, you got to unmute.
I must thank again for capturing all the problems in one slide. Thank you, Doctor. We couldn't have done faster than this.
Thank
Next
you.
is Subodh
I
Kumar.
believe the slog over run rate was
Very
appreciated.
good.
Thank you.
You are 10 plus.
Thanks.
Okay. Now comes Subodh Kumar, an Indian owner, 7 Islands. So let's hear from the Indian problem. Subodh, I hope you can bat as fast as Doctor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to cope up with that. I'll just share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to thank AMICIE for giving me an opportunity to attend this webinar. Good morning, Madam Malini Shankar, distinguished members of the panel, and dear friends and colleagues. Now, the topic under discussion today, the IMO greenhouse gas emission and the transition to a zero or low carbon fuel, is of extreme importance to all segments and stakeholders of the maritime industry, and is the industry's response to the global climate change challenges. So let us look at the emerging regulatory landscapes. As said earlier, also almost 80% of the world trade happens through shipping, which contributes to about less than 3% of the worldwide CO2 emission. But every effort counts in this march. The IMO strategy to reduce greenhouse annual emission by 50%, which was formulated in 2018. The market-based measures, which is being considered by various stakeholders like levy on bunker fuel and the emission trading systems being contemplated. The Poseidon Principle by financial institutions who are into ship finance. The Chicago Charter by major traders and charterers in bulk and liquid. These influential organizations are actually considering the carbon footprint of their business activities and are collaborating and with their members and incentivizing them to monitor, control, and reduce the greenhouse emission from their individual activities. So let's see in short, what are the regulatory and technical challenges you are facing? The rules and regulations for transition are yet to be finalized, as in a change of flux with rapidly evolving technology. It's reported that close to 75% of the world tanker fleet do not have any EEDI data, and estimated 85% of the vessels will have to do some upgrades, modification to meet the EXI compliance by 2023. We are going to see increased scrapping of vessels, affecting the vessel availability in the current market for the tradings. The IMO greenhouse strategy, 40% reduction of intensity by 2030 and 50% of the annual greenhouse gas by 2050. This was in 2018. However, this is being challenged by many stakeholders, stating the zero emission is possible by 2050 with the technological advancements. LNG, LPG, biofuel, methanol now are being considered as transitional fuel in the march towards zero emission, with green hydrogen, green ammonia, and fuel cells being promoted as the ultimate zero carbon fuel. There's a lot of research going on by interested stakeholders in different parts of the world in different technologies with their own agenda. The need to focus, as stated earlier by earlier speakers, the need for concentrating on the entire value chain of a fuel cycle and not just the downstream. What does it cost to create those green fuels or the fuels of the future? How much is it? How much carbon is going to emit in producing them, storing them, distributing them? So it's very important at this stage we look at the complete value chain. So what are going to be the ship owners' challenge? We anticipate a huge challenge for the owners, especially those operating older second-hand tonnages. They're going to reduce profitability due to revenue loss, increased voyage cost, increased cost of fuel, increased capex and opex, modifications and upgrades. Lack of cost-effective upgrade to improve the fuel efficiency of the older vessels. Financing is another issue. Having to scrap a significant fleet size due to non-compliance with the new EXI CI regulations coming into force in 2023 and 2026. Those who are in the second-hand market, the non-availability purchase of fuel-efficient ships in the second-hand market, with the new building growth at a very low level, and everybody waiting for the new technology to emerge before they invest in. There are not going to be many fuel-efficient ships in the second-hand market. Insufficient availability of the low-carbon fuel and bunkering options in your trading area, whichever low-carbon fuel you are looking at, or for the transition period, whether it's available where you are trading is a question mark. The charterers and the traders lack of flexibility on accepting a lower voyage speed. It is proven that over the last decade, the slow steaming has produced the largest reduction of the CO2. So what are the options? So what is the pathway for a ship owner? Identifying means of complying with EXI by 2023, and if not economical, scrap the vessels. Once EXI is met, then the next challenge will be to maintain the CI trajectory till 2030. And if not possible to maintain same by 2026, corrective measures are required And if that is not possible, maybe you have to again scrap the ship, look at. Identification and installation of cost-effective efficiency improvement, unscheduled layup and docking for these upgrades to be factored in. Those who are in the new vessel tonnage market, opting for it will be maybe beneficial to upgrade the vessels instead of for the short-term targets in lieu of heavy investment in newer ships designed for low carbon fuel. Till the relevant technology matures and a clear path emerges. You don't want to be investing on a ship with a technology and later on down the time you see that fuel is not available or more expensive to operate those ships. Monitoring the future low carbon, zero carbon fuel proposal due to the current high level of uncertainty. The pathway has not emerged. Many options are being proposed. So which is going to prevail? And finally, having a sustainable business model and ready to accept changes to the way business are conducted presently in how the future vessel will be designed, built, operated, and traded in the coming decade for reducing the carbon footprint of the organization. This has to be a part of the goal of the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Subodh. Thank you, Subodh, for exceeding 80% MCR. I hope your readings are all right. Okay, we have now Sanjeev Verma, Captain. He is heading Land Bridge Ship Management. We needed somebody from Hong Kong. That is a big ship management center. Happens to be AMICIE's new member. So let's hear from him. Sanjeev, you have to bat as fast as the last two. Thank you.
Good morning, Captain Suri. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Yeah. Good day, everyone, and good day from Hong Kong. It's a brilliant speeches by the fellow speakers. So I have been told that I need to rush fast. So, well, I'm representing the ship managers' view on this fantastic subject matter of fuel and environmental mix. I will straight away would like to take everyone back to the 2020 regulations, which we have just came back a year back, like, you know. And some of the facts which I would like to share, though these facts are known to everyone because this is a history. And so far as we are talking about the future, I would like to take everyone back to the history. And VLSFO, this is one of the biggest changes which we have encountered in the last 2 decades of in our industry, changing the sulfur caps from 4.5 to 0.5. The last drastic change from 3.5 to 0.5. Though some of the fellow speakers have said that it is successful, I would definitely, to a large extent, agree with them. But having said that, as a managers, those who've been operating the ship, they would understand how successful and what kind of difficulties which they have faced. There was a paper from the ICS, PEMCO, Intercargo, and Intertanko, which took the survey from their members, and I just put down the numbers. Which majority of them, they had the issues with the VLSFOs, with almost like 1/3 of them, or probably 1/5 of them has to be debunkered, including us as an operator also. That's a fact also, and we should not forget that one. In fact, the Lloyd's Register has published a paper somewhere in the 3rd quarter of 2020 towards a large wear on the 2-stroke engines because of the VLSFO fuel. This has not been a very smooth transition, and we learned the lesson. Well, these lessons to certain ship managers have been very expensive lessons, but I wish that these lessons we don't have to go back again when we operate change new type of the fuel and new type of engines.
Sanjeev, you're done?
Just one more slide, Captain Suri. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Let's skip this part. Again, this is the fact, but later when I share my slides, you can have a look. This is a result from one of the major ship manager. They collected the data and again related to the VLSFO. For the ship manager, like, though we are all talking about the environmental issues, and not to forget that environmental is one of the of the many environmental related regulations which are going to be coming in force in the near future. Greenhouse gas is just one of them. Sulfur we had just dealt with. Greenhouse gas is coming up, and we are a lot talking about it, but not to forget that the others which are there in the pipeline, ballast water, biofouling, recycling, sewage, gray water, plastic litter, all these things are coming up, like, and this is all going to add on, to the seafarers, going back to the seafarers as a manager, because we are concerned that the seafarers has to devote lots and lots of time to think that, like, which part they are going to comply, regulatory, industry, and there are the vast number of requirements which they need to comply. Towards my very last slides, some of the issues which managers would be facing, and they will be more concerned of, is that the supply chain issues definitely will be covered by in reality by some other players, but the crew training, one of the major concerns, the shore managers training with the new type of fuel and engines coming in, and not but last least is the transparency issue when we report the consumption of these fuels to the regulators. How transparent the players are, because then it won't be a level playing field if the people are not transparent that what they're consuming. And while we are talking about what kind of fuel and what kind of engines will be running in the future, there should be also a talk where the engines or the machineries on board should be fitted in such a way that these numbers can be, in a very transparent way, can be reflected, so that we can really know what is the impact of these new type of fuel and new type of engines. So that's all from my end, Captain Suri. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajeev. That was real fast. Now, I must thank all 100 for staying back. Don't go away. Lunch is going to be good. We have a very good speaker next, our own MS Dhoni, who can bat at any place and finish with a 6. But the topic is very, very important. It is where the nail hits the wood, soft wood. It is all commercial problem. Whatever you say, it costs money and time. It creates disputes. So let Puneet address that. Puneet, you can take a little longer than others because there are 2 dropouts in the end. So don't worry, time is absolutely under control. We have Puneet, and then we have Rajesh Tandon complaining about what the crew is being overloaded with, and Misra to sort of round up from IRS, and then the vote of thanks and closing. So we are very much on time for your beer. So Puneet, take your time.
Thank you very much, Captain Pollard. And it has been a fantastic learning experience so far. It's thank you so much for AMICIE to host this. I'm very happy to be a part of AMICIE, and of course, I speak here on commercial aspects. I think, being a Gujarati, I feel very much at ease talking about money. So I feel that I'm quite well relaxed in this case. But also importantly, I wear a couple of hats. I am still involved with Claviness here in Singapore as a director. I also vice chair the Singapore branch of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. So that's a commercial part. And I also wear a hat of running Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration. And I think there will be a lot of disputes which will eventually come through with these aspects coming in as well. So it's going to be interesting space to watch out. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to present. So let me have a look at, give you an overview of what I'm trying to discuss here. The key commercial issues involved in this particular topic are about fuel, performance, and charter party clauses. The other aspect is planning for new regulations from a commercial perspective. From a commercial perspective, how do we plan for these new regulations, which are still, as it was rightly mentioned earlier, in a state of flux at the moment? And finally, based on all these aspects, what are the key challenges and uncertainties which are haunting us at today's space? But more importantly, they will give us a kind of a inkling of what we need to concentrate on commercially to make sure that we actually try and surmount those challenges and create clear certainties on these things. So coming to fuel, performance, and CP clauses, let me give a very simple outline. The traditional approach for payment of fuel is charterers always pay for the fuel. Either they directly supply the bunkers or they buy it from the owner in a time charter. Otherwise, they simply paid as a part of the freight, which is a voyage charter. Now, this means that they've always paid for the fuel as such. The risk of vessel performance is either directly borne by owners, which means in a voyage charter, there's obviously no concept of speed claims. But in case of time charters, there is a concept of a speed claim and a performance claim, which obviously means that the performance eventually gets down to the owner. This is exactly what the charter party clauses till date have been catering for. They've been catering for traditional approach on payment of fuel and assessment of vessels' performance. Now, overall responsibility of complying with fuel regulations mostly lies with the ship owners. This is what the traditional paradigm today is. This is what the matrix today sits with on the commercial side. And the charter parties are basically derived or looking at these aspects at this point of time. Now things are changing. IMO 2020, we saw a completely new way of realizing how commercial relationships have to adapt to new fuel regulations. This was about the same set of people, owners and charterers, but talking about different aspects and different ways of compliance. Who's responsible for what? Either it's a technical issue, having storage tanks capacity to get the new fuels, how to consume the new fuels, scrubbers, and how to economic impact of scrubbers, or it was effectively a financial aspect, which was basically more about the price differentials and the IFO and the VLSFO and things like that. Now that was, you have had a test bed and you have sorted that out in the past. But decarbonization, as it is now known as the key driver, and that was there very highly on the agenda in the Singapore Maritime Week last week, is a whole different ballgame. And why is it a whole different ballgame? For the first time, the risk of fuel and vessel performance is also being shared by charterers. The charterers are actually getting involved in basically saying, we need to take a call. We are not just paying for the fuel. We also want to be a little bit more involved in the performance of the vessel and deciding how the vessel performs actually. The reason for that is Sea Cargo Charter. Sea Cargo Charter is a reality already. It establishes a framework. I think there was already a mention of that in the previous presentations. It establishes a framework for assessing and disclosing the climate alignment of ship chartering activities around the globe. Now, this is the first time you actually had a situation where major owners, including Klaveness, by the way, charterers, people like BHP, BP, Cargill, and traders, they've all signed up on the bulk trades. They've actually signed up. So there was a lot of discussion earlier on the Sea Cargo Charter saying that this is more about charterers. No, it's not. It's actually owners as well coming on board and looking at this. And this means that there is a clear difference in terms of how compliance will work. It's not just the owner's problem anymore. If you as a charter have signed up for Sea Cargo Charter, you also need to start complying with those emission targets that you have set for yourself. The key challenges with this, and obviously these are the questions that need to be addressed by all of us going forward. The first is there going to be a preference or benefit for Sea Cargo Charter compliant vessel or any other Sea Cargo Charter type of arrangement that comes in? If there is no preference given by the so-called traders and the owners as well as charterers or rest of the people who are not on the Sea Cargo Charter, if they don't give any such preference, they're not willing to put any money into that, it's going to be quite difficult to actually see any advantage effectively because the market is super fragmented. So if it's going to be a disadvantage, I think this can collapse very quickly before we actually start the journey. What about vessel performance warranties? The charterers, in order to comply with these Sea Cargo Charter requirements, will actually request different performance parameters and actually insist on slowing down ships to reduce emissions. In that case, what happens to the traditional performance warranty clauses? What happens to the performance claims? It's not going to be easy to actually get that going as yet. The biggest challenge, and I've spoken to people who've been involved in the Sea Cargo Charter, that they've actually stumbled on one big problem, and that is there is still no standardized, measurable, and trustworthy benchmarks to monitor and measure emissions. Yes, RightShip has got a few things, the technology being developed on sensors, but it's still something which people have not got a consensus. Unless you have a standardized way of doing things, you will not be able to enforce those standards as such going forward. Of course, the idea is, when Captain Pollard mentioned this as well, BIMCO is trying to look at now, how can we actually create a situation where if such savings or costs are actually incurred for emission requirements to be complied with, who benefits or who pays for them? Are they going to be shared? How are they going to be shared? So this is going to be a kind of a difficult ground to cover for a lot of people because we're still not getting a clear answer from anybody so far. The other thing is, of course, enforcement of standards. The only two things that work is either fear of penalties or sanctions or lure of financial benefits. That's the only two ways that decisions are made in the human psyche. So we have to realize that enforcement of standards have to basically have the carrot and stick approach. There's no other way out of it, but we have to be clear what the carrot is and what the stick is as well. And finally, the electric cars are a good example. The reason why in Singapore as well, there's a talk about electric cars in a big way. The uptake is not great because the charging stations are not there. The infrastructure is not yet there. So availability of these future fuels, given what we have been talking about, that there are multiple options available, how are you going to make this available? Today, I know I can plan my voyage in a commercial sense very clearly that I'm going to get this fuel in Singapore. Maybe then I go to Hong Kong and pick up the next bunkering port, and then accordingly I can plan my voyage. That's not going to be, the luxury of that is not going to happen at this point of time. So we need to think a little bit about it. The story so far, just watch this space. There are clearly untested waters, and current commercial terms and CP clauses are not covering these aspects at all. BIMCO, as Captain Pollard mentioned as well, and other industry organizations do have clauses for slow steaming, but nobody is dealing with emissions as yet. And potentially, we are creating differential pricing with compliant and non-compliant parties. So it's a question of two camps. And because of the fragmented markets, especially in the bulk side, it's going to be a challenge as such, how to manage that. The other thing is, while we talk about Sea Cargo Charter as a good example, there are some big heavyweights there. The BHPs, there are Cargills, the Trafiguras. They are the ones who might actually have to say, I actually have to push my counterparties and say, unless you comply, I can't do business with you. Will they do that? I'm not so sure about that. Lots of questions and very few answers. I'm sorry I don't have more answers, but the questions is probably the first stage of trying to get to the answer, because without questions, there are definitely no answers. Yep. Thank you so much. You're on mute, Captain Pollard.
Okay, thanks, Puneet. That was real fast, like MS Dhoni style. Anyway, we have two dropouts. We have only one more real speaker after this, but we must listen to Rajesh Tandon. He is our only, what you say, the Maritime Day award winner from the marine fraternity, those who have sailed, and he carries the crew's burden very well. So here is Rajesh.
Can you go? Good afternoon, guys. Can you see my screen? Or not yet?
Not yet, Rajesh.
Oh dear, this technology pedestrian thing comes into play, you know.
We can see you, if that's good enough.
Okay, then then you can just look at my face and you'll get everything that you want. Zoom meeting. Let's try to go back and share screen again. Where the hell is it gone? Wait a minute, guys. Sorry about this. First, I minimize this.
Stop sharing and restart it.
Yeah, but what happened to, I can't get back to the...
Shall I share?
Yeah, if you can, that will be great, you know.
Let me see.
Because I can't go back to the meetings screen.
I'm trying to open.
Top right hand corner, the view. You can use that.
Okay. Right. Great. I think. Thank you, Pulat. Thanks for that. Well, good afternoon once again, guys. First of all, I take real offense on you, Suri. You just said we'll have only one real speaker after Rajesh Tandon. So I don't know what I am, you know. But that said, a lighter way, don't mind it. Yeah, the crew is always the convenient whipping boy, everybody. So I'm quite used to it. Well, good afternoon, folks. At the outset, I would like to compliment the organizers and the entire AMICIE managing committee. And I'm not going to say office bearers because Raja Krishnan may come up with some other retort there for arranging this event, covering the wide spectrum of subjects topical to the industry. And I don't want you to present that elephant again, Suri. If the people remembered where the crew was, I think that was very aptly depicted. But there are ladies on this, so I will not go and elaborate further on that. I would like to start, also like to thank AMICIE for giving me the opportunity to raise the concerns from a seafarer's perspectives. Normally, the events like this go so technical and so much on the commercial aspects, rightly so, that the seafarer is relegated to position number 2. Seafarers are very frequently also get relegated to being an incidental part of the entire equation rather than being an integral part. Well, until fully unmanned vessels come into play, seafarers will continue to drive the vessels and are expected to deliver their obligations with full regard to safety of life, the environment, the vessel and the cargoes. People will remember this phrase, write what you do and do what you write. I'm sure you're all familiar with this statement in the preamble of the ISO, which is now the basic genesis on which the safety management systems are developed and audited on to ensure continued compliance. I vividly recall at the time of the introduction of the SMS systems when I was ashore in Monte Carlo. We used to have basically 2 documents, the quality management manual and the operation manual. Some used to have a separate document or an annexure for the forms to be completed for audit purposes. The number of forms at that time was commensurate to the documents we had, just 2 simple thin manuals that we used to have. Where are we with that today? Have you ever seen the safety management system of a company operating all types of ships? Oh boy, you just have to see that and see the plethora of forms that accompany that to do the record keeping. We also perhaps all recall the introduction of the ISM code, which was adopted in 1993 and I think made mandatory sometime in 1998. Several ship owners and managers were already implementing the elements in their system as part of best practices. Checklists were intended to serve as an aid memoir to the seafarer to ensure safe day-to-day operations and record keeping that they covered all the aspects. Which brings me to something that Pullet spoke to me when actually he asked me to speak here. Over the last 2 decades of rulemaking, be it IMO, ILO, trade-specific bodies, OCIMF, TMSA, CDI, you name it, intergovernmental bodies introducing several legislative requirements, flag state inspections, port state inspections, Paris MOU, Tokyo MOU, OPA 90, has all mushroomed around us over the last 20 plus years. Along with that, the plethora of checklists and forms, which were initially intended to assist the seafarer to do his job, have now become a tool for investigators, lawyers, and other enforcing authorities who go at it with a forensic type scrutiny. Given the humongous liabilities that potentially arise following a maritime incident, it is inevitable, and each stakeholder with a battery of lawyers and the benefit of hindsight has a go at the ship staff and their paperwork to try and minimize their principal's liability. Invariably then, crew negligence becomes a convenient choice where to park the blame. When existing rules that apply to existing vessels are amended or modified, for example, tonnage rules, MARPOL, single hull, double hull tanker, etc., there is always a grandfathering clause which permits them to operate until the end of their life. Are similar concessions ever considered for seafarers of vintage, but are yet well within their working life? I leave you with that thought. The STCW and several other regulatory provisions require that companies evaluate the competence of each seafarer before he is appointed. Take a simplistic example. Now, I think perhaps it's not relevant in today's time with so much of complexity and equipment that we have, but take an AB who has worked for 2 decades with a commendable performance review. He struggles to part the computer-based computer evaluation system, CES test, competency evaluation systems. Why? Because the SMS requires that every seafarer should be tested for his competency. And what is the measure? The CES CBT. Is that the correct way to assess him? He may well know his job. He has performed for 20 years with excellent performances. Now, if the assessing officer, in his wisdom, condones the test result despite sufficient risk mitigation steps, He would be grilled if things went wrong, and the lawyers will have a field day at him to try and park the blame that there was something wrong with the AB's performance, and he was not, the company didn't even evaluate his performance. Take the same AB who, if steering a vessel in a narrow pilotage area, and I'm not suggesting the ever given over here, take the same AB who is steering a vessel in a narrow pilotage area, and because of the elements of the nature or the vessel's operational limitations, or perhaps the pirate error runs aground, it would be absolute rich fodder for the lawyers. The seafarer would surely lose his job. Well, I am not challenging the merit or necessity of the various regulations that have come up and the processes by which it is implemented. But I'm equally sure that you will agree that this is an area of serious concern for the seafarers. Are we providing the seafarer with the necessary tools to be able to handle the constantly increasing requirements? Well, from my perspective, the manning levels of vessels has remained unchanged practically since the time God was a boy. Over the last 4 decades that I can recall, at least, if at all, crew complements have reduced over the last 4 decades. At a risk of inviting the criticism of the responsible ship owners and managers who do the right thing, the industry is measured by the lowest common denominator. One is perhaps constrained to think that the IMO resolutions on principles of safe manning and the human element aspects of the various regulations require strengthening. The Maritime Labour Convention, of which I am a great fan and supporter, having been part of the STC in Geneva for the first 3 rounds, is considered as the 4th pillar of the international maritime law and Seafarers' Bill of Rights. While it has done a lot of good, there is still a lot more to be done. Perhaps, pardon my cynicism, and perhaps in lighter vein, the MLC too has added to the seafarers' workload given the number of company, port state control, flag state control, ITF inspections the seafarers have to undergo. The title of this seminar was Explosive Mix. Hey guys, I want you to ask the seafarer who faces the threat of criminalization for doing his job diligently at all levels. And then we say that the seafarers are having mental issues, health issues. Are we surprised? Well, the fix is do another CBT, another checklist, a tick in the box, and all will be well. That's the way we are.
Okay, Rajesh, we're done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. 100 plus for staying around. We're not finished with just one speaker. We have about few questions, just about 4 or 5. So just hang in there. They're very important questions. Mr. Ji, your turn. You're an IRS man, well known. So make it as fast as possible.
Yeah, good day to our chief guest, Madam Malini Shankar, ladies, gentlemen, and colleagues. On behalf of IRS, I would like to thank the organizer, AMICIE, for giving us opportunity to share the class perspectives on the subject. As a lot of areas have already been covered, I will just try to cover things in brief. Can you share it? I think I'm unable to change. I'm unable to change the slide. Yeah, so we can go to second slide. Yeah, as all we know that basically marine environment protection not only have implications for each country, but also it brings significant global benefits. And all this has started, like IMO was the first UN agency which has brought the mandatory regulations for international shipping, and this came in force on 1st January 2013. And things started speeding up when IMO strategy was adopted. That also during MEPC 72, in April 28 by resolution MEPC 30472. And this represents the first global climate framework for shipping and includes quantitative targets. Vision, everybody is aware, so we can go to next slide. Yeah, so as far as the level of ambition is concerned, this also has been covered many times. And basically, IMO has set an ambitious goal and ambition in its preliminary GHG strategy. And these are the three main ambitions, which is indicated here. And to meet this ambition, IMO has come out with short-term, mid-term, and long-term measures. And that timeline has been set for that. And during those timeline, these targets has to be met. Can we go to next slide? Now we have to see what has been done and what is on the table. So, I mean, if you look at it, initially, I mean, 1st January 2013, MARPOL Annex 6 Chapter 4 was revised and Regulation 19 to 23 was brought in to introduce mandatory technical and operational energy efficiency measures to reduce the emissions. And these basically included EEDI for new ship and SIM for which was applicable to all ships. So generally, people are aware of EEDI and SIM. In between, like since 1st January 2019, IMO DCS was introduced, and the whole idea was to see where we are, what is our current level of emission. And this was applicable to ship of 5,000 GT and above. And for this, ship is required to collect consumption data for each type of fuel oil, what they are using. And that specified data, including proxies for transport work, was reported to flag RO for further submission to IMO. And basis which ship has been issued a statement of compliance. Draft text was basically approved during MEPC 75 that uses a version of EEDI and definitely EEDI phase 2, which will be basically applied retroactively to all existing ships, and that is known as Efficiency Design Index for existing ships, that is EEXI. This draft also basically enhances the SHIMP, where SHIMP is becoming mandatory and bringing the concept of mandatory operational efficiency improvement targets. And as already has been covered by Mr. Bose, that for CII, all ship will be graded from A to E, and basis on this grading, those ships which is falling between A, B, C is fine, but those who are falling between D and E, there will be basically D will be asked to improve their performance, and E, even discussion is going on that their basically international energy efficiency certificate also may have to be put on withhold or may have to be cancelled. This kind of discussion is still on in MEBC. Can we go to next slide, please? Referring to candidate measures set out in initial strategy, and if you see like midterm, use of alternative low carbon and zero carbon fuels have been spoken by many speakers, such as methanol, LNG, ammonia, hydrogen, etc., is going to be the key to decarbonize the shipping sector by the second half of the century. And if you these fuels, they have great environmental benefits, which has been stated earlier, compared to traditional fuels, but there are some drawbacks also. If you look at the drawback and measures, I mean, basically they have low flash point. So for application of this inert gas system has to be there, and SOLAS revised IGF code has to be followed for any low flash point fuels, and required risk assessment has to be carried out. Fuel like methanol, hydrogen, ammonia, they have lower volumetric energy density, and which will need pilot diesel injection, and that will need more space on the ship. Methanol and ammonia, as I already stated, they are very toxic, so risk mitigation measures has to be there, and crew has to be trained as per IGF code. These all fuels for this, there is a high production cost, and cost of retrofits are also very high. So economy of scale has to be brought in by ramping up production. They are having low viscosity, so use of injector nozzle sealing and leakage avoidance has to be there. If you look at LNG, hydrogen and methanol, they are corrosive. So risk mitigation measures has to be carried out, and compatible materials has to be used in accordance with the SOLAS. Fuel like methanol, hydrogen, they burn and they give invisible flame. So their flammability is high. So for this, double walled pipes will be required, and special fire detectors will be required, and firefighting equipment. Actually, the low flash point is a major concern so far, and its fuel's flammability tendency and invisible flame. So risk assessment becomes inevitable to make the operation smoother using the low flash point fuel. We can go to next slide. Now, when we are talking about gases, our use of low carbon fuel or zero carbon fuel, the training of crew becomes very important, as has been stated by the previous speaker. So company they have to ensure that seafarers on board ships which are using gases or other low flash point fuels, they have to be completing training as per STCW convention and IGF code. The all training requirement is stated in part D and section 19. What all crew has to undergo training who are working on this. If you look at the DG shipping, they have also come out with their circular, that is circular number NTDNG 2021. That also set out the requirements for training for personnel working on ships subject to IGF code. We can go to next. So just to conclude the matter, the importance and resilience of the shipping has been showcased to the world as we continue to the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has resulted in postponement of a lot of international discussion and has left with a limited time to agree and implement the short-term measures. Right now, short-term measures are in discussion. They will come in force. So we have covered in this short-term and mid-term measures, and challenging targets, as we know, are there by given by IMO for 2030 and 2050. And these are basically pushing the industry to new solutions around fuel, around operating practices, around design, and they all has to be environmentally responsible. They have to be commercially viable, technically feasible, and safe. Over the coming years, as already stated, a great deal of R&D and innovation will be required, and industry collaboration will be needed, funding will be needed to improve the energy efficiency and emissions from the maritime supply chains. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to Misraji. Now I have to sign off after introducing, requesting Kamal to take over the question and answers. And finally, our treasurer, AMICIE treasurer, Captain Ramakrishnan, will say a word of thanks. But before I go, Chidambaram of Chidambaram Ship Care, our veteran, wants to thank Rajesh Tandon for extensively covering what he was supposed to cover in case anybody missed. So thanks everybody. See you next time. We have a month on very, very important topics. We intend to shake the movers and shakers. That is what is AMICIE's vision. Stay with us. All the 95 or 100 who stayed overtime. Thank you very much. Kamal, question and answers. Thank you. Bye.
We'll send you the bill for the beer.
Thank you, Suri. Yes, Suri's been holding a proper IPL over here and chasing people with bat and ball. So I hope everyone here has been having while learning a lot, having a laugh as well. So okay, we will move quickly to the questions without any further ado, as they say. Captain Manmohan Saggi sent the first question is from him. It's from Mr. Bose. Mr. Bose, are you here?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, sir. Here goes the question. What is a realistic roadmap for Indian shipping to comply with IMO requirements in the short, medium, and long term? That's the first part of the question. The second part is what regulatory measures the government of India, DGS, needs to undertake in this regard, and what are the funds required and how industry holders can aggregate them. I think that covers the entire afternoon for us. So you may start, please. Thank you, Mr. Bose.
Okay. Thank you very much, Captain Saggi, for your question. I am aware that there is a green shipping 2030 vision of Government of India, and so that shows a roadmap until 2030. And I'm aware that there will be obviously legislative changes to incorporate CII and EXI, which are the short-term measures until 2030. And also there is a focus on reducing the carbon intensity of our vessels on the coast, because this is added to national emission. So they would be looking into these ships more, which are on the coast. And with respect to transition to zero carbon fuel, etc., ammonia is one. I mean, we had a workshop just last week, yes. With IMO, we had a workshop on this, and that has been identified as one of the fuels because India deals with ammonia. In one of the earlier lectures, this was covered. Then we also have in port, they're going to have shore power, I mean cold ironing, giving power to the ships, but that's more for reduction of sulfur emission. Then there is capability in Cochin shipyard. They have made, Das Gupta mentioned about the solar power ferries. Then even battery ferries have been built. So there is a capability in these areas, and we not need to explore on, it's just not the shipping sector, the energy supply sector and all, etc. So all those are, I'm sure these will all go forward in India's Clean Shipping 2030 Vision document. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bose. And the elephant that Suri depicted a little while back, that actually has been, he kept telling you guys, but that's been done by one of his nephews. And I think there's great talent in his family and great understanding of the, and I think they're only 18 or 19. So that's the youth coming up. I don't know, Suri, are they from our industry or some other industry?
Thanks, Kamal. Go ahead with the questions.
Okay. All right. The next question is from Jagmeet Makkad. His question is not for anyone in particular, so I'll pick Mr. Anil Kumar to please answer this. Anil Kumar, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Anil. The question is, there appears to be an inclination towards ammonia as a solution. Considering the very serious consequences of leakage on board, what are the views of the esteemed panel about viability of this of ammonia?
Yeah, so the project which we are involved in, the one I mentioned, the MISC, Samsung Heavy Industries, from ammonia fuel projects, and also working with Ammonia Institute. So a lot of evidences and a lot of risk mitigation has been taken so far. So which is at a much matured level at the moment, and there are lots of technology, I would say, safety issues what we found out. Apart from the question, there are vapor handling issues, and there are issues with how to handle the leaked ammonia, and also structural protection of the containment system, because ammonia liquefies at it has to be stored at minus 33 degrees centigrade. So there are challenges associated with all that, safety and technical challenges, and which in the project what we are involved, we have overcome those challenges. Yeah. And there are also environmental issues. Apart from this, using ammonia, there are issues around NOx, SOx, and particulate matters as well, which can also be overcome by the engine manufacturer, and also used in the abatement systems. Yeah. So there are technical challenges, and there are in fact, we have done a regulatory readiness mapping for ammonia, and there are a few areas like safety and technology, which I just mentioned. And there are red flags there, and there are red flags also with lifetime greenhouse gas emissions. It means that though if we cover the safety and technical aspects, and we will have also issues with how do we actually comply with the IMO's greenhouse gas emission target. That means what form of ammonia we are going to use. Are we going to use the black ammonia currently we have for the fertilizing industry, or are we going to use the brown ammonia, or because having a green ammonia on board the ship, for that we need to have those renewable electricity available at cheaper cost, and ammonia should be able to, we should have ammonia available at the bunkering facility in the world, around the world. So apart from safety and technology issues, there are also greenhouse gas issues associated with ammonia. So it's an evolving fuel, and we don't have answers for all that, but then working with Ammonia Institute, a large part of the safety risk has been mitigated.
Thank you, Anil. There's a second question as well for you, and that is, please advise, and this question is also from Jagmeet Makar. Please advise if LR is working on thorium-based SMRs, which are small modular reactors, with 28% of global thorium reserves in India. It would be a huge strategic gain for India. Please comment.
Yes, the nuclear, you mean, Makar? Yeah. So nuclear is one of the options, and as we can see, it's also allowed in SOLAS, and we have got a nuclear safety certificate we can issue to commercial ships, but we don't have so much of inclination in the commercial shipping. We are using this quite successfully for the naval fleet, particularly on submarines, and certain effect to aircraft carriers. Yeah. So the interest of thorium or a nuclear installation on a commercial merchant fleet is had to be seen.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you so much. We have another question. The next question from Mr. Narasimhan Ranganathan. This is again for Mr. Bose. I'll read out the question. It's given the recent push by US and UK governments, where they have directly addressed this issue, naming IMO and promising to work together, do you see any fast tracking from the existing roadmap? They have called for zero carbon emission by 2050, 50 years earlier.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Narasimha, for that question. Yes, I have also seen that news item. And a good thing is that US is saying that we want to do it through IMO, unlike European Union, where they have their own regulations, regional regulation. So, I mean, at this point of time, only thing we can say, this is all subject to negotiations. There are a lot of negotiations happens. So, I mean, the 2023 is the revised strategy when it will come up. So, I mean, we expect tighter regulations, but how tight, I mean, that we have to see. And because member governments want it. So, we have to see how many member government don't want it. I mean, it's not feasible. You have to have regulations with the practical, technical readiness of technologies, impact on developing economies. All these has to be taken into considerations. So we have to see how the debate goes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My next question is for Dr. Sairam. Dr. Sairam, you still there?
Not sure.
I am there.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Thank you. Dr. Sairam, this is from Mr. Ramji Krishnan. He says, IMO should be more focused on sorting out the outstanding pending issues with SOx and NOx. There are apparently issues with VLSFOs as well. Please comment on this.
See, I would like to, what to say, take up this question with this note, simply no sulfur, no SOx. With VLSFO, you are trying to achieve that. But please remember, from Shell's paper, your VLSFO is being a concocted or an agglomerated of 6 different sources. So naturally, all the troubles with regard to your cat fins, alphins, your pour point, your injection viscosity going haywire, people have seen the niggles. But as I told your good selves, scrubber was not the solution. You are doing a pollution shift. As per Chalmers University, all the pollutants which were polluting the air is now been washed and sent to your sea. So that leaves us 2 important things. One, your fuel, that which we are trying to use it as LNG. Please remember, any compression ignition engine over and above temperature of 2800 Fahrenheit, straight away it will give you NOx by Zeldovich mechanism. If at all, if you want to control it out, you have to either go for post-combustion technologies, which is going to create a hole in your pocket, or you are going to reduce your temperature of combustion, which requires addendum means. Coming to your green ammonia, you combust. As I told your good selves, definitely it will contribute to NOx. In case of LNG, it will lead to methane slip or unburnt hydrocarbon, which is going to go out. 1 unit of it contributes close to around 30 to 40 times CO2 in case of LNG as a fuel. And in case of ammonia, if you generate NOx, which is very obvious, 1 unit of NOx contributes to close to around 292 units of CO2. So the best option would be, rather than giving these sort of urgency and rather than giving these sort of urge to transfer, let us give some more time for R&D to take up validation and validate and give us a precise direction of how to continue with the fuel.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. The next question is from Mr. N.R. Krishna Kumar. And I would like Mr. Dasgupta to please answer this. Mr. Dasgupta?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. I'll read out the question. It's, can somebody inform about cold ironing? Sorry, can you inform about cold ironing, use of green power when ship is in port? In the context of clean infrastructure investment, this may be a powerful game changer, and emission reductions for ship owners and credits to ports would be in the offing.
Okay, I'll try to reply to that. Essentially, for the ships at ports, we did not have the same kind of fuel source for the gensets to be used at the ports and the ships and the propulsion engines which are used for the voyage. So it is possible to have a separate set of fuels, like the fuel cells, which use very little amount of, which rather delivers very little amount of greenhouse gas and other emissions. That can be used while the vessel is at port, because the energy requirement normally is much less, or the ports can take care of that. So this would be possibly the right approach, but it needs to be clarified through industry acceptance as well as the acceptance by the respective ports. I'm through.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I have the last question here. We are running short on time. We extended ourselves, I think, past many people's lunches and beers or whatever else waits at your tables. The last question is from Puneet Oza. His question is, and I think Mr. Anil Kumar would be the right person to answer this. Anil, please.
Yes, sir.
What are the best ways to learn from other industries who are also having similar decarbonization challenges?
Very interesting question. Yeah. If you look at the aeronautical industries, they have done the energy efficiency optimization to the extent possible. That means unless they change the aircraft design as such, that they can't gain any energy efficiency, they can't gain it any longer. So the only way they can the aircraft industry is to switch over to absolutely zero carbon fuel. Whereas in shipping, and we are at a quite an early stage of, I would say, making that energy efficiency measures. As you can see, the recent EEXI measures for our existing ship. And even for new builds, we have EEDI. So we are in phase 2, and we are going to be on phase 3, and there are talks that we are going to be on phase 4 or phase 5 subsequently, and substantial reduction in gain in energy efficiency. Yeah. So other industries, automobile industry, just to compare, they have done the energy efficiency to the extent possible, but in shipping, we still have got a lot of energy efficiency gain happening at the moment. That's one which is striking me. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anil. Thank you so much. That's all the questions we have for today. There are a couple more, but I think we will try and answer those through the email for the persons who have asked those questions. I will hand over now to Mr. Ramakrishnan KG, the treasurer of AMICIE, for delivering the vote of thanks. Everyone, thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Captain Ramakrishnan. I would like to thank, first of all, our chief guest, Mrs. Malini Shankar, for gracing with her presence here. And I think I should say the committee which organized this, which had, I think, 3 speakers on policy and drafts, followed by almost 6 speakers who had the questions and some answers with that. And it was really engrossing, and I thought the audience will drop out by the first 1.5 hours. I'm still surprised to say that we still have 77 people as of at this point of time, which shows the level of interest, though many of us are retired or semi-retired for shipping part of it, but the interest is great in finding out about new technologies and answers as to what is coming in. I should thank one and all for being here, and as I would like to remind what Bullet had already said, that we would like to have these sessions every Saturday, the first Saturday of every month. And even if it is not so elaborate, there are so many different topics, so many interesting topics we would like to cover, and we would like all of you to attend to all these sessions and be here. Thank you one and all, and have a good lunch after this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.